already know most of the story if you studied your lesson, Daniel in the Lions Den, one of the famous stories of the Old Testament. And the title, Faith in Times of Trouble. And I believe last week was something similar. Faith that pleases God was last week. No, faith in the fiery furnace. Faith in the fiery furnace. And this week is faith in the times of trouble. And it comes from the 6th chapter of Daniel. And we know Daniel, along with the 3 Hebrew boys, were faithful to God. So here we have yet another person that loves our Lord. Last week we talked about strength in numbers, but this week we're talking about being on your own. And how do you stand by yourself? We've heard the old adage, we see how you are in church, but when you go outside those doors when nobody's around you, what do you really, really stand for? Boy, if the walls could talk. I don't know what your walls would say. My walls would probably tell you, sometimes he slip up. Sometimes I have to question. But he does get down on his knees and he does pray. What would your walls say? You ain't got to tell nobody. I'm just open. But just think about it. What would your walls say? Okay, we started at the 10th verse. But I would just like to back up to the 4th verse, if you don't mind. So hopefully you have your Bible. So Daniel chapter 6, because it helps set up the story. Because a lot of us don't do the background part of the study. But let's start at verse number 4. And the decree of King Darius. And I'm reading from the King James today. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom. But they could find none occasion, nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the kings and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. And all the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and princes, the counselors and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which altereth not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. And here we get into our lesson. Verse number 10. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, and did he aforementioned. Verse number 11, then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. We're just going to keep on reading. Verse number 12. Then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, this thing is true according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which altereth not. Then answered they and said before the king, that Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, Know, O king, that the law of the Medes and the Persians is, that no decree nor statute which is the king established may be changed. 16. Then the king commanded, they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, Thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. Let's stop right there for a minute. So we find out that Daniel had a reputation of being faithful to God and serving God. So first point I want to bring out or ask the question is, what is your reputation among men? How do people see you? What type of lifestyle have you led? Can they say that you're a good person or a person that follows Christ, or like we like to say, Christian? Or are you a wayward Christian? Or are you one who don't serve God at all? Now, we know that in today's society, Ms. Bell, or Deaconess Bell, there are many people who call themselves Christians, but you can't find Christ in nothing that they do. But they'll wear that title, Christian, and try to justify every sin that they commit. And that's a travesty to us who truly believe, because we get grouped in that grouping because they use the title Christian. And when you do your the study of the word Christian, it means to be Christ-like. So that's another question for you to do on your own study. What is it truly to be Christ-like? Do you know the attributes of Christ, the characteristics of Christ? And when you study that, do you live up to being labeled as a Christian? Because I guarantee you, if you really do the study of what it is to be Christ-like, this altar will be full next week. So Daniel is known by the king to be faithful, but we see in the story that there are people who are watching Daniel and he doesn't fit their agenda. And they go about to set up a plan to take him down. We read that in the story that they tried to find fault in everything that he did. No doubt they looked at how he lived. Was he robbing and cheating because he had a position of power? So they was looking for some fault in what he does, so they could lay claim and blame on him to get him discredited. It's amazing how the world wants to discredit people so that they can get their agenda across. We see it in politics, we see it on the job, and we see it in church. And if truth be told, we see it in our families too. So Daniel was being hit on every side. But what does Daniel do? Daniel stays faithful. He stays faithful. Now, all of us here have worked jobs. Many have worked jobs longer than I have. I've been working since, I want to say 1984. That makes me sound old, but I know some of y'all can go back further than that. But when you think about how long you've been working, whether it's at one job or two jobs, how many times have you been the victim of lies, innuendos, and people trying to set you up for the fall? How many times? When you think about it, it puts things in perspective, doesn't it? So we can understand what Daniel's going through. And what does it say in the scripture? It says in verses 4 through 9, it says that they looked at Daniel's life. They couldn't find fault. And they said, the only way we're going to get him if he breaks one of the laws of his God. So they not only knew their local laws or their national laws, but they also studied his laws of his God. Who does that sound like? Or who does it sound like they're being led by? The devil. Old Slewfoot, Satan. Because the adversary knows what we should do and should not do, what we can do and cannot do. Say, I'm going to help you with something. He knows what we can legally say and what we can't say. Because a lot of things that we speak out of our mouths are not according to the word of God. Because when you speak, you either give permission to or hindrance not to. The Bible puts it this way: there's life and death in what? The power of the tongue. Amen. So also, when you really start studying from Genesis, you find out that God gave us dominion over the earth, so whatever we speak here on earth is to happen. So if we open up the door by saying things that go against the word of God, we give the adversary permission to come and antagonize us. What did Jesus say in Matthew 4? Man shall not live by bread alone, but out, well, by what? Every word. Let's say it again. So words have power. So they know what we can do and what we can't do. And so they looked. And so then what they do, they set him up. O king, you need to sign a decree that can't nobody worship any other God. Basically what they're saying, you can't worship no other God for 30 days. For 30 days, you can't worship nobody else but you. Deacon Bell, you can't come to church, hold your office, pray or none of that for 30 days. And if you come through that door, or we find you out on the street, whether you're in a restaurant or store, anywhere, and you mention this God that you serve, we're going to feed you to the lions. Deacon Bell, in all honesty, do you think that you could do that? Okay, you said no. That's good. And the other question is why? See, because it's going to go to Daniel, but why? Won't allow you to. Okay, open that can up. Okay, it's a reason why. And see, this will help you understand this lesson a little bit better. But why? You says that you can't go 30 days without coming to see God, without praising God, without mentioning God or anything. And you say you can't do it because of the way you live, but why? Can't do it on your own strength? Okay, y'all are there, but help them out, Deaconess Bill. Help them out. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere.
So every day of my life, this could be my last time you see me right here.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to stand for something.
Okay.
So at my age, and I know, I'm not going backwards.
Okay.
And I'm not afraid of dying.
Okay.
So I'm living for him. So whatever it takes.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell somebody, no, I'm not going to stop praising my God because I know who gives me the day.
All right, now we're cooking with gas.
And I know who allows me to do the things that I do in this day.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not going to tell somebody I'm not going to praise my God.
Okay, so can't nobody tell you that.
Nobody can tell me that.
Okay, so Deacon Bell, you wanted to? Yeah, somebody can tell you. Huh? He wrote for you on the spot? Okay. I can agree with that. Okay. But let me ask you this question, and maybe I should have focused it this way. Because of your relationship with God, could you allow anybody to tell you not to serve God? No. Okay, and the key word in that question was relationship. Okay, and we talked a little bit about it last week. Your relationship goes to the communication with the person, your faith in the person, your trust in the person, and the proof of that person and how they treat you and how they stand for you and provide for you. So if you have a relationship with God, especially like Brother Daniel, where God has not shown you anything that he is negative in your life, why would you not serve him? And us today, let's flip it a little bit, Dr. Spradley. Although we go through so many different trials and tribulations in our life, has God ever shown you that he's not with you? No. So if he's never shown you anything negative or inconsistent, how could you allow somebody to tell you not to serve God? So now, do you see where Daniel is now? Daniel has been serving God, and God has shown him. We remember the story of him fasting the 21-day Daniel fast. We know all about that. You know, we know all about that stuff. The three Hebrew boys just happened. Now, we've seen God in other people's lives and in our lives. But I'm telling you, according to the law of the land, you can't serve God no more. But Daniel said, I'm not trying to hear all that. I'm going to continue to serve God. So now we got a quandary. On one hand, I got my faith to God. On the other hand, I got the law of the land. Now, who is more important to you? Let's put it this way. You got Trump trying to get back in office. What'd you say? That's easy. That's easy. Okay, well, let's not use Trump. We got the politicians in Washington. And we know the laws of the land and how they affect us. Whether they're good or bad, they affect us. And we got the laws of God. Now, whose law is in charge of your life? God's law. Now, if you've learned anything in your few years on this earth, that if you follow God's law, man's law will fall in place. But if you follow the law of the land, I can almost guarantee you that you're going to commit sin against the law of God. Okay, so Daniel is there. They do it, and then they set him up, Dr. Spradley. Daniel, he's being faithful. He's doing his normal routine. He prays, and they see him. And they say, King, Daniel has broken your law. Now, you know that we can't let this go. We done found fault in him. We can't let this go. Oh, boy, we got him now. We got him now. How many times have you been in that situation where they say that they caught you doing something wrong, but you know it's right according to God? Come on, y'all can be honest with me. I know you've been there. I know you've been there. You stood up for God and what's right, but the world saw it as being wrong. And many of us have been in leadership positions. Am I right? Is there any leaders that was on a job? And you've had that quandary of personal acceptance to say, okay, am I going to do this? But I know it's wrong according to God. You know, and they found out and you had to go sit in the room. My thing was being pulled on the carpet. I never liked being pulled on the carpet. I go being pulled on the carpet. And they tell me, well, you a preacher. How can you act like this? We told you to do this, but that's not right. Okay, the scope of work says X, Y, and Z, but you wanted me to do A, B, and C. So I have to do what the scope of work says because that's what we're bound to. So they find him in this position, and the king gets to the point where, yeah, we can't let this go. And those powers that be have set Daniel up, and Daniel now has to take the fall. And the fall many of y'all ever been faced with being fired from a job and that was your only source of income? And when you looked at the dire consequences of being let go, you did not know how you was going to take care of your family. Men, I know in the era of the men that are in here, the men are the primary breadwinners of the family, unless it was a unique situation in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Men were the primary breadwinner. So if the man lost his job in those decades, the family was put into a situation where it might not be good. And if it was a single mother or a mother who was carrying the weight for the family for whatever reason, if she lost her job, her family would be in dire straits. Because it's not realistic now. It's getting to this point, as you hear about the wars over on the Eastern European world, that people are starting to be persecuted for their walk with Christ. So, can you imagine what it would have been like, Deacon, if they told you they was going to take your source of income to provide for your family, and you had to go home, and that young lady behind you, you had to tell her that you lost your job because you followed God? It wouldn't have been an easy conversation, would it? He said no, real quick. But the thing is, and I'm trying to get you to see, is that Daniel was faced at a point in his life where he had to stand firm on all that he was doing and talking. Remember last week we talked about your walk is what really people see? So imagine, people have been watching you, and they put you in this position to say you're about to lose everything. What are you going to do? Daniel stands fast, and they put him in the lion's den. Now let's look at this. Last week we had fire consumed, and this week we got live animals. And if you know the history of the empires of this time, the animals that they kept in captivity, Deaconess Bell, they didn't feed them on a regular. They wanted to keep them lean and agitated, so that anytime they sit somebody down there for judgment, it was swift and quick and painless, gruesome. And I don't know if you've ever been on safari. I know y'all travel a lot. So if you've ever been on a safari and you go over to Africa and they take you on a safari, they tell you to stay inside the caged jeep, because these are wild animals. No matter how much they've used to seeing people, these are still wild animals. And we know, for us who have pets, that that's still an animal. And at any point in time, it can turn on you. So these lions, although they were kept in this den, they are still wild animals, Deaconess Barrett. And when Daniel gets lowered down in there, can you imagine how those lions looked? If lions could talk, lions probably said, oh yeah, we got one now. I've been waiting for this. I'm hungry. Look at him. He looked like he's been feeding good. So we're going to get a hold of him. But when he's lowered down in there, Deacon Spratt, guess what? He's lowered down, and he's there. And God does something unique. These hungry animals that are supposed to eat him up, they turn to his pillow. So can you imagine what it's like for Daniel? Because we're going to talk about King Darius in a minute. But Daniel is lowered down, staunch on his relationship with God. And he's walking around these lions. And these lions, who are ferocious animals, turn into house cats. And going back to our situations in our lives, we've been put in positions where we could have lost everything. But because we stood fast and firm to our walk with God, everything that the devil and his minions have set us up to do for the worst part of our lives, God turns it around, and it becomes a benefit and yet another testimony. Huh? The point where you want to shout, ain't it? But it ain't over. Because, see, once we get in the situation, we got to live through the situation. It's one thing to get in a situation, and tell me if I'm wrong. It's one thing to get in a situation, but it's another thing to live through a situation. Am I right? See, a lot of us have had go to the doctor for a sickness, and we get that initial diagnosis. You got cancer, you got heart problems, you got diabetes, you got X, Y, and Z. And that shock hits you. And you try to figure out, oh Lord, what am I going to do? But see, then you got to live through it. Your faith is tested on another level. Because God doesn't take you out of the situation. He takes you through the situation. Now, how many of us can remember? I know we have a few. I have a few. But how many can remember some situations where God got you through the situation? You was put in it, and it didn't change the people around you. But you changed because you had to trust God and hold your head up and walk with God and walk through it. They thought that they had you. And they did everything. They got paperwork. They got records. They got videos. That's the common thing now. They got videos. They got you. According to them, dead to rights, you're supposed to go down. But God turns that thing around. And what was meant for your bad, God turns it out for your good. So Daniel is in this lion's den. The lions are sitting there, hungry, supposed to eat him. And he's supposed to stay there all night long. And then what does it say in verses number, the latter verse, Daniel verse 16, it talks about in the morning time, Darius couldn't get there fast enough. Because we read in the scriptures that weren't in our lesson that Darius knew that Daniel was a devout Christian and that God worked through Daniel. So it's a lot of times, watch this, it's not the boss that's mad at you, but those around you who want your position. And those people that are around you, they're the ones setting you up. Because see, watch this. We don't talk about this a lot when we preach this. But they not only set up Daniel, but they set up King Darius. Because Darius knew that he done nothing wrong. Y'all see the story now? In seminary, we would call this the typology of Christ there. Because who else knew that they were persecuting a man that was not sinning or breaking the law? Oh, y'all supposed to shout right there. But anyway, King Darius goes early in the morning. And what does he say? Who does he call for? He calls Daniel. He calls Daniel. Verse number 19. At first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. 20. When he came near the den, he called Daniel, and in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to rescue from the lions? Now, we'll gloss over this and say that he called out to Daniel and he was just wondering if God had delivered him. But look what it says. When he came near to that, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, meaning that he was worried and concerned. He knew Daniel was a good man. He knew Daniel served God. He knew that God had just done some things in the past. But Daniel, he said, Daniel, has your God. Well, first of all, he says, Daniel, servant of the living God. The living God. So in other words, Darius knew something about God. And he attributed to the fact that this God was living. In other words, he's not an inanimate object that they place on a shelf. He wasn't a little fat man with a belly called Buddha. He wasn't that Yoda girl sitting there with all the arms, sitting on your desk with the arms all over the place. Y'all know who I'm talking about? He wasn't Mog or Dagon that was in the temples and God knocked him over. He wasn't your little crystals. But he's a living God. So he acknowledged the fact that he was a living God. Then he asked the question, has he delivered you? So in the way my mind works, he's looking for some validity in this God that you say you serve. Because we know that people are always watching us. Am I right, Deaconess Bell? And they're always watching to see if this God that we claim to serve, if he's really true. By our what? Actions and how we respond, Deacon Graham. So we got to be careful how we respond to situations. Now, Daniel could be down there, sleeping, having a good time with the lions, but he answers. And Daniel answers, says, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel. Oh, here we go. And he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. Verse number 21 sums it all up. It really does. Daniel did not lose his respect for the king. According to the way that the scripture is written, he didn't have no verbal animosity towards the king. He didn't call him out his name. He still gave him respect. He didn't lose his character, in other words, is what I'm saying. He didn't lose his character. So we got to be careful how people treat us, how we respond. And we can't be found out of character because although we are delivered, they're still watching to see how we walk after the deliverance. Then he says what? My God sent an angel. In other words, God sent help. How many times have you received help from God? And when I'm saying help, it wasn't no man or woman around. Nobody else could have helped you out that situation. But it's like the story where the little boy was getting in a fight with a big boy. And he wanted to fight because he had to protect himself. And that big boy, he was huge, somebody like me, going up against Derek. Just using the size comparison. And Derek is devout to God, but I'm a big old bully. And I'm known around the streets of being mean and nasty. I go to fight Derek, but behind Derek, I see something supernatural. An angel. And I'm looking at this angel and I'm looking at Derek. I'm looking at Derek and I'm looking at that angel. And something about that angel tells me, don't fool with Derek or it's going to get bad. So I leave Derek alone. So in this situation of imminent hurt to Derek or death to Derek, he's been protected by God because the angel showed up and told me or showed me not to mess with Derek. Same similar type situation here. The lions were supposed to eat him. But God sent an angel down there. And when you get into angelology, you understand the power of angels. But just the presence of the glory of God that emanates off of them is enough to stop a bad situation from happening. Because they carry the glow of God. So the angel is there. He's been delivered. And what does he say after that? They have not hurt me because I was found what? innocent in his sight. Now, I would rather for God to find me innocent and be able to live than man to find me innocent, because their innocence is only contingent until the next sin. I know that was a little deep, but we're gonna roll with it. He says, I've been found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you. So, in other words, if we apply this to our lives, when God shows them that we were not wrong, he also lets them know that, hey, God sees that I'm right. Now you have to accept the fact that I did not break your laws. Because if I had, my just God would not have allowed me to come through this clean, because I broke his laws. So I've been judged by God, and now you have to clear my slate too. Okay. So now we're going to go to 23. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted out of the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in God. We talked about this last week. Do you look like what you've been through? Be honest with yourself. And see, this was the Sunday school lesson is designed for you to look at yourself, find yourself in the story, see how God has also worked in your life. So I'm asking you this question because it's so serious, and it's going to help develop your faith. Do you look like what you've been through? And many of us have been through some things. Am I right? And it may not have been physical, but stress is a killer too. Stress is a killer too. And when you go through a stressful situation, oh my goodness, it affects your body, your mind, your health. It's almost worse than getting beat up. Because how many of y'all have been through some stressful situations and it affected the way that you thought or the way that you acted, and you fall into a point of depression, or you have an anxiety attack where you can't breathe or something like that? So when God lets you come out unscathed on the other side of going through, you got a reason to shout right there. And I don't have to wait for you to get your shout out, because all I got to do is look at my life and I think about what I've been through. You know, and as you're sitting there, and I can see in your eyes that you're going through your situations that you've been through, whether it be yourself or family, finances, and you're going through it and you're thinking about how God has got you through, and you don't look like what you've been through. Because some of us have been down to our last half a penny, about to lose our house, don't have no food in the storage, kids are going crazy, everything has fallen apart. But you prayed to God and you stood on the test of time with God, and God worked it out. Or you've been in a hospital sick unto death. They told you weren't going to make it, but God brought you through. And you don't look like the scar that's on your body, or what they said you was going to look like. You was going to be down for 6 months, but God got you up in 3. You weren't going to be able to walk no more, talk no more, do this no more. But look at what God has done for you. You don't look like what you've been through, because you're supposed to have scars, and most of the scars are not physical. They're psychological. I'm going to end on this note because I know it's about that time, ain't it there? Watch this. We go through trouble as Daniel did in this lesson. He was unscathed physically, but there could have been psychological damage to him of knowing that the people that worked around him tried to take him out. That the king that he served, although he knew that he was true, still sentenced him to death. But God delivered him. And now as he's standing before the king unscathed, he can stand with his head held high and say this, that for God I live and for God I die. And then what? At the end of the story, it says that Darius made a decree. Verse number 26. It says, the B part of that says, for he is the living God. That they must have fear and reverence, but that he's the living God and endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. Watch this, and I'm done. You have been delivered through your situations. And you don't have to tell your testimony, because guess what? The people that try to persecute you will tell your testimony for you. So stay faithful in the times of trouble. Next week, we got a young brother coming. Going to be his first time teaching here. So we're going to work with him, and we hope that y'all are receptive to him, because we're trying to get more teachers. So if you want to teach, just let us know. All right? Give God the glory.